My name is Joss Hart. I'm 43 years old, retired Brigadier General, United States Air Force. I've spent more time in desert war zones than in living rooms flown through enemy fire more often than I've flown home. I've been called hero leader, threat, never daughter, never sister, at least not in any way that mattered. I was sitting alone at Gate 14, watching the morning crowd swirl around me like I wasn't even there when the message came through. 7 words. No punctuation, no warmth, just no place. Don't come back. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the brightness all the way down and slid the phone into my coat pocket. No one around me noticed. That's the thing about public places. You can get your heart cracked in two and still look like someone just waiting on a delayed flight. I stood, adjusted my collar, and walked toward the gate. No hesitation. I had paid for every first-class ticket on that plane, including theirs. My mother, father, and younger brother. The ones who'd just erased me by text. But 5 minutes after I took my seat, the aircraft stopped. The door to the cockpit opened. A man in full pilot's uniform stepped out. His eyes searched the cabin until they landed on mine. Then, in front of everyone, he saluted. "Ma'am," he said, "General Hart, please come with me." Before you hear the whole story behind that moment, if you've ever been abandoned, hurt by your own family, and still forced to smile through it, leave a comment. I'm not telling this to complain, but because, maybe somewhere, you've felt what I felt. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. I didn't stand right away when the pilot called my name. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. For just a moment, I sat in seat 12A like I had every right to be forgotten. The cabin was so quiet, I could hear a child drop a juice box 3 rows back. When I finally rose, I did it without drama. Years of service had taught me that some battles weren't fought with weapons, just silence and the refusal to retreat. I followed him down the aisle toward the front, but I wasn't thinking about the upgrade. I wasn't thinking about what my family would say if they'd say anything at all. I was thinking about the look my mother gave me when I boarded the plane earlier, the half-second flick of her eyes in my direction before she adjusted her scarf like I was background noise. They were seated in row 8, my mother upright in her ivory blazer, her sunglasses perched even though the cabin lights were dim, my father beside her already half asleep before takeoff, indifferent as ever, and my brother Nate scrolling his phone between his 2 carefully combed children. Not a single one of them acknowledged me as I walked by, not even a glance. And when the flight attendant approached earlier to say a family needed to be reseated together, I didn't have to ask who she meant. She didn't say much. Just, "Would you mind moving back, ma'am?" She said it with the kind of politeness that was really a dismissal wrapped in customer service training. I could have declined. I had the right. I bought the seat. But rights don't mean much when you've spent your whole life being told in 100 subtle ways that you don't belong. So I nodded, stood, and walked toward the back of the plane, dragging my carry-on like a soldier retreating from a war she never volunteered for. Row 30, middle seat, no window, no view. As I sat, I looked around not at the faces of strangers, but at the quiet spaces where I should have existed. In conversations that never included me. In vacations they planned without asking. In holidays, where my presence was politely tolerated, never welcomed. The worst part wasn't the move. It wasn't even the sting of being asked to disappear. It was how unsurprising it all felt. Like it had happened 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different forms. A missed call, a forgotten birthday, a family photo where I was always just out of frame. I sat in that cramped seat, hands folded in my lap, and told myself I was fine. That I was used to this, that it didn't hurt anymore. But I lied. To myself, even now I lied. Because somewhere deep in my chest, I could still feel it. That old ache returning steady and sharp. The ache of being unwanted. And the shame of still hoping that one day they'd let me in. The air back in row 30 felt different. Thin, colder, like it had farther to travel, and less room to breathe. I shifted slightly in my seat, trying to ease the dull pull in my left knee. Old injury, shrapnel, Helmand Province, 2011. Still ached when the cabin pressure changed. Still reminded me that not all wounds leave visible scars. The seat beside me stayed empty for a while. That felt like grace. I leaned my head back against the rest, letting my eyes blur out the soft movement of people boarding. But my mind, as it always did in moments like this, pulled backward decades deep toward the kind of pain that teaches you how to be invisible. I was 7 when I first learned the weight of absence. Nate had just won second place at his school's science fair for a baking soda volcano that barely fumed. My mother baked a cake. My father shook his hand like he'd split the atom. I stood off to the side, clutching a spelling bee ribbon no one asked about. That night, I sat on the porch steps alone, the wind cold against my face, listening to them laugh inside. They never knew I wasn't in the room. They never asked. At 13, I tried out for the school band, practiced clarinet for weeks. My mother told me it made her migraines worse. I dropped out quietly. No one mentioned it again. At 16, I told my father I wanted to go into aerospace engineering. He blinked at me like I'd mispronounced my own name. "Don't you want something more feminine?" he asked. "Something that won't waste your looks." By 18, I stopped asking them for anything. The day I got my appointment letter to the Air Force Academy, I left it open on the kitchen counter. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would say something. They didn't. My mother folded the letter and slipped it under the morning paper like it was junk mail. My father never even mentioned it. I left 3 weeks later, no hugs, no tears. Just a quiet ride to the bus station paid for with my own savings and a government travel voucher. They didn't come to my commissioning ceremony. They didn't write. And for a long time I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need them to be proud. I had rank, medals, a team that trusted me with their lives. But even now, decades later, medals packed in boxes, ribbons gathering dust, I still remembered the silence. The kind that hums louder than applause. The kind that makes you wonder if maybe you really are just difficult, unlikable, unworthy. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt all at once. It erodes. And when that flight attendant asked me to move, she didn't know she was just the latest messenger. Just another hand delivering a message I'd already memorized. "You don't belong here, Joss. You never did." The woman who eventually filled the window seat beside me looked barely out of college nervous eyes, oversized sweatshirt, with a faded campus logo paperback novel clutched like a shield. She slid into the seat with the soft sort of energy people use when they don't want to take up too much space. I recognized it immediately. She smiled at me once. Quick, polite. I nodded back and went still. Somewhere near the wing, a child laughed. Somewhere closer, a man cleared his throat, like he was preparing to be bored. The cabin creaked with the ordinary sounds of flight. But inside, I could still hear my mother's voice clear as day from a kitchen 30 years ago. "She's not like us," she'd whispered, thinking I wasn't in earshot. She was right, I wasn't. I shifted, and the edge of my sleeve brushed the ring on my right hand, a simple gold band engraved with the Air Force crest. The girl noticed. Her eyes dropped to it, lingered for a moment, then darted back to her book. But I could feel the question forming in her silence. Finally, she glanced up. "Sorry," she said, tentative. "I hope this isn't rude, but—" "Were you in the military?" I nodded. "I served," I said simply. She hesitated, then softened. "My dad was Army. 2 tours. Used to tell me bedtime stories about sandstorms and radios and a soldier who saved him once. He never knew her name, but said she pulled him from a burning Humvee. Said she didn't even flinch." I looked at her, not hard, just fully. I remembered that day. I remembered the smoke, the screaming, the way my hands blistered on hot metal. I remembered dragging 3 men out of that wreck, one of them barely breathing, whispering for his mother, while I pressed gauze against his chest. I didn't say any of that. I just said she was real. The girl smiled, a little embarrassed. I always hoped so. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. Sometimes a stranger sees you more clearly than anyone who shares your blood. She returned to her book. I returned to the hum of the engines. But something in me had shifted. Not cracked, no, those fractures were old. This was something quieter, like a thread tugged loose. In the row ahead, someone sneezed. I closed my eyes and tried to forget the ache in my knee, but the ache in my chest that stayed. Because for all the pain, the history, the erasure, I was still here, still breathing, still showing up. Row 30 didn't make me smaller. It only reminded me what I'd had to grow beyond. And as I sat tucked into that narrow seat, invisible to the people who once called me family, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe in years. One day someone would see me, and it wouldn't be because I begged them to. I didn't notice the cockpit door open at first. I was too lost in the drone of the engine, too deep inside the stillness I'd wrapped around myself like armor. But he saw me. From 20 rows away, through a blur of faces and overhead bins, the pilot scanned the cabin with practiced indifference until his eyes landed on mine. It wasn't recognition at first. It was a flicker, curiosity, then memory, then something quieter. A long pause. Then he turned and stepped back into the cockpit. I didn't know who he was yet. I didn't know his name or why the muscles in his jaw had tightened just slightly when he saw the insignia stitched onto my jacket cuff. I didn't know that 15 years earlier, under a sun that scorched the bones, I'd pulled him and 2 others from a burning vehicle in Kandahar. Back then, I'd been Major Hart. He'd been just a young airman named Michael Stenson, fresh out of training, still believing wars had clean lines and medals fixed everything. He had screamed so loud, I thought the sky would split. I dragged him out anyway, shoulder-dislocated blood down his collar, sand in his teeth. He'd passed out in my arms before the medevac arrived. I never saw him again. Until now. Of course, I didn't know all that yet. I was still sitting in the back of the plane, trying to forget the way my mother adjusted her sunglasses like I was glare. Still remembering my father's last voicemail, "Don't stir things up, Joss. Just let it be." Still hearing the soft ding of the seatbelt sign and thinking how it sounded like resignation. The plane inched forward, wheels rumbling beneath the floor. My fingertips grazed the edge of my boarding pass, creased now damp from my palm. I tucked it back into the pocket of my jacket, the one with the faded name patch. Joss Hart. That was all I had left of myself in this moment. No family watching, no one waiting at baggage claim. Just a name on a threadbare tag, and the hum of an engine preparing to lift me out of this silence. But behind that locked cockpit door, a memory was unfolding. A ripple was forming. Because sometimes the people we save don't forget, even if we do. And sometimes, just sometimes, the past loops back, not to haunt you, but to hold you up right when you're about to disappear again. The flight attendant began her safety demonstration, voice flat and practiced. The cabin lights dimmed. I fastened my seatbelt without looking up. I had no idea that Man Captain Michael Stenson was about to stop the entire world just to remind me I mattered. But I would find out, in 5 minutes. The plane jolted slightly, then paused. The seatbelt sign blinked overhead, a soft ding breaking the steady hum. People looked up, puzzled. We were lined up for takeoff. Nothing should have stopped us now. But something had. Then came the voice. Calm, unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be holding our position momentarily for an important cabin acknowledgement." The murmur started immediately, passengers shifting, whispering. I sat still in row 30, instinctively straightening my spine. Something in his tone wasn't procedural. It was personal. The cockpit door opened. He stepped out, tall and composed in navy and gold. His cap was off. His gaze was steady. Captain Stenson. He didn't speak right away. He walked the aisle slow and certain, his eyes sweeping the rows until they found me. "Ma'am," he said loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "are you Brigadier General Joss Hart?" The world stopped. I heard someone gasp. The young woman beside me turned her head wide-eyed. I nodded once, my voice stuck behind years of silence. The captain turned to the passengers. "Allow me to introduce General Hart," he said clearly. "United States Air Force retired. 23 years of service, multiple combat tours, Bronze Star, Distinguished Flying Cross." The cabin was frozen. Even the air felt different, thicker with realization. She was asked to move from her assigned seat today. He continued, his tone unflinching. "But this woman once pulled 3 men, including me, from a burning vehicle under enemy fire. I'm alive today because of her." The silence held, but now it buzzed. I could feel it crackling through the rows. Someone near the front whispered, "She's a general." Another voice followed. "Oh my God!" Captain Stenson turned to me again. "General Hart, I'd like to personally invite you back to seat 1A where you belong." My hands trembled slightly as I unbuckled my belt. I rose slowly, not for show, but because my knee still carried the price of my years in uniform. The captain offered his hand not out of necessity, but out of respect. I took it. And then I walked, past seat 17. then 12, then 9. I didn't look for them, but I didn't have to. I felt them. Row 8. My mother sat perfectly still, lips slightly parted, frozen mid-breath. My father, hands clenched too tightly in his lap, eyes flicking toward the window, as if that might protect him from the weight of what was unfolding. And Nate. My brother, the golden child, looked up just once. His face was pale, unreadable. His mouth moved as if to speak, but no sound came. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past them the way I had walked past so many things in life, pain, disappointment, the desperate hope that one day they'd see me. Captain Stenson spoke once more as we neared the front. In all my years of flying, I've learned one thing, he said, voice even, but full. You don't leave your people behind, not in war, not in life. The passengers were dead silent, not out of awkwardness, but awe. I reached 1A, sat down. The seat welcomed me like something I didn't know I'd earned. The captain gave a nod, then returned to the cockpit. No one applauded. No one needed to. The moment wasn't for spectacle. It was for dignity. And for the first time in a long, long while, I had it back. I sat in 1A, hands folded gently in my lap, the leather firm beneath me, the cabin settling into that heavy quiet that follows a shift too big to ignore. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew their silence by heart, the stunned, breathless kind reserved not for loss, but for reckoning. Then a voice came from behind the curtain. "Excuse me, General Hart." A man stood there, mid-50s, maybe jeans and a windbreaker, fingers gripping the seat back like the words cost him something. "My son," he said, clearing his throat. "Corporal Nathan Reese, Afghanistan, 2009. The name hit me like a ripple from deep water. I remembered the dust, the screams, the smell of metal and blood. I had dragged his son out of fire, kept him alive long enough to reach the medevac. He made it home, the man said, voice cracking. Married now, 2 kids, teaches chemistry in Idaho. He tells our family, you're the reason." He looked down, then back at me. "I never got to thank you." "You just did," I said, steady. He touched his chest, nodded once, and disappeared behind the curtain. That moment, quiet, clean, unadorned, meant more than any medal I'd ever been pinned. A few minutes later, another figure appeared. Nate. His hands were in his pockets, eyes flicking to the floor, then to me. "I didn't know they'd ask you to move," he said, like the truth might soften the damage. I didn't agree with it. I didn't look away. Some wounds don't heal with, "I didn't know, Nate." He nodded slowly, for once not trying to win. Behind him stood my mother. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. But something in her posture had shifted. Her arms, once crossed, now hung quietly at her sides. She looked at me, not through me, and there was no pity in her eyes this time. Only recognition. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Some distances can't be closed with a single look. But maybe, just maybe, she finally saw me not as a problem to manage, but as a woman who endured. The curtain closed. The plane took off. Somewhere above the clouds, I breathed, truly breathed, for the first time in years. I thought of all the years I tried to be enough. The medals, the silence, the loyalty no one asked for. And then I remembered why my family cut me off. I had reported my father for financial fraud 20 years earlier, not out of vengeance, but out of honor. I could have destroyed him publicly. I didn't. And still, they cast me out. Not because I failed them, but because I refused to help them lie. Now finally, I didn't need their forgiveness to feel whole. A week later, a letter from the Department of Defense arrived. Post-retirement recognition. Another star. I read it on my front porch alone, the light warm across my face. No tears, no applause. Just peace. Not because they changed, but because I did.